Welcome to CG Dive. If you have a rigged mesh and part of it bends and stretches even though you want it to stay rigid and solid, then the reason is often the weight binding. The mesh is affected by multiple bones, so it bends. However, if the vertices are affected by only one bone, yet the mesh keeps bending, then your rig is probably using bendy bones even though you don't realize it. And this is a common problem with Rigify that people ask me about, but it can happen with any rig that uses bendy bones. So here is a very simple example to show you how this works. I have this strange looking object and it is weighted and parented to an armature. So if I go to pose mode and rotate these bones, you'll see that the object bends and squashes a little bit. And if I first go to object mode and then select the armature, then shift select the object and go to weight paint mode, we can see that the weights are fairly smooth, which creates this bending effect. If we want this part of the mesh to be fully controlled by this bone, then of course we can do weight painting, but I think there is an easier way to do it, probably the easiest one in my opinion. So let's go to object mode. I'll select this object, go to edit mode and select one of these vertices, and you'll see how it is affected by multiple bones. And as we go further down, you'll see that the effect gets stronger. So I'll select just one vertex and then turn on X-ray and select all of the other vertices of this part of the mesh that I want to affect. And now again, I have to shift select one of the vertices to make it active. And here in the side panel under item, I can see the vertex weights. So what I need to do is I have to set the weight for the bone that I want to affect this part of the mesh to 1 and all other to 0. And then I'll press the copy button. And that will copy these values that I just set for the active vertex to all of the other selected vertices. Okay. Now I'll do the same for the remaining 2 segments of the mesh. Here bone 001 needs to have a value of 1 and the other ones 0, and copy. And one more time. And now if I go to object mode, select the armature, shift select the mesh, go to weight paint mode, you'll see that this part of the mesh is fully controlled by this bone and it doesn't bend. Okay, it stays solid. However, if I go to object mode, select my armature and go to pose mode, and let's bend this a little bit to see what happens. Now, if I go to the bone tab and bendy bones and increase the segments, you'll see that the mesh immediately started bending. And if I do this again for the next bone, it will become even more pronounced. And then if we go to the armature tab, viewport display, and switch display to BBone, it will become apparent why this happens. With bendy bones, Blender creates these virtual bones that automatically create a curvature. If I remove the bendy bones, then the curvature will be gone. So bendy bones can be very powerful, but at times they can create unwanted effects. So next we'll see some practical examples and how to deal with them. And by the way, just a quick tip. If we go to edit mode here for the mesh, and check the vertices, you'll see these 0 weights. You can manually delete them by pressing the X button, but if you want to do it automatically, just go to weight paint mode, and from the weights menu, choose clean, all groups, and a limit of 0, and you can check keep simple just in case. And now if I go to edit mode, you'll see that all of my bones that used to have 0 weights do not have them anymore. Okay, so now you should understand the problem and you should understand how to set weights using the vertex weights menu. So now let's move on to some practical examples. Okay, so here is the first practical example. I have this soldier character here. I have my Rigify meta rig, which I'm going to generate right away. Boom. And then I'll hide the meta rig. And so on this character, I have these pouches, which you often see with military type characters, and also buttons. And these pouches and buttons are common examples of this problem that I see often. So let's parent these meshes to the generated rig with automatic weights. And it is not going to work quite well. And so this part of the mesh kind of works, but if I move the hips, you'll see that part of the mesh weren't quite weighted. While I was testing things, I also got bone heat weighting error, which is another very common error, which I'll do a separate video about. But here, really quickly, if you want to avoid such problems and you're okay with paying some money for a paid add-on, then you can try the Voxel Heat Diffuse skinning add-on. So I'm going to undo the parenting with automatic weights. And I have the add-on already installed. I'm going to go to the Mesh Online tab and click Voxel Heat Diffuse Skinning. And it takes a couple of seconds. But now you'll see that the character is weighted correctly. There is no weighting error and no floating parts. Okay, I'll do a separate video about weighting errors. There are different ways to solve the problem. Voxel Heat Diffuse Skinning is probably the simplest solution. It is very, very good. It has some weaknesses that I've noticed. For example, fine areas like the mouth. But anyway, that is a topic for another video. So now we have the character weighted. And let's see how everything bends. If I bend the hips, you'll see that this pouch stretches and this one compresses. And if I rotate the chest, you'll see this button kind of stretch. So part of this problem is the weighting. So I'm going to quickly fix the weighting just like I did in the simple example a minute ago. So these pouches need to be weighted fully to the spine 1 bone, actually to the deaf spine bone. So this one will be 1 and all other groups will be set to 0. And then I'll just copy these values, and then same for the other pouch. Copy. And then the buttons. Let's actually unhide the deformation bones so that we can see what we are working with. So this is spine 001, 002, and 003. So this button needs to be weighted to 001. This one to 002. And this one to the last spine bone. Okay, now if I select the armature and then let's say I shift select this button and go to weight paint mode and control click on the last spine bone, you'll see that it is fully weighted. It is completely red, so it's fully weighted to this bone. Cool. Now I'm going to unhide my controls. And even though the buttons are fully weighted to their respective bone, they still kind of stretch. Okay, stretching in here as well. The pouches kind of stretch and squash. It's not as bad as before, but still they do. And you probably understand the problem by now. It is bendy bones. So let's display bendy bones. And now if I select these deformation bones, go to the bone tab, bendy bones, and set the active one to 1, and then control click and choose copy to select it, then the bendy bone effect will be gone. And if I rotate this control, the pouches will stay solid, they won't bend. And same with the buttons. Okay. Now the buttons don't bend, but there is another problem with them, that they don't really behave as if they're attached to the clothing. And not only that, but you may also be asking yourself, what if I want my bendy bones, but I also want the pouches to not stretch? And I'm going to be answering these questions in the next minutes. Let's start talking about solutions now. And the simplest solution we already kind of covered. If you don't care about bendy bones, just disable them. Just select the bone that you don't want to have bendy bones. And if it has any, just set segments to 1, and that will disable the bendy bones. Since we're talking about Rigify, I have to mention that if you go to your meta rig and generate again, then the bendy bones will be back. Rigify always creates bendy bones for the spine, and there is no way to turn them off from the meta rig. For example, for the arms, which I'll talk about in a second, there is a meta rig setting that you can tweak, but not for the spine. So we can turn them off manually, it's not a big deal, but if you want to automate it, there are a couple of options. If you have our Game Rig Tools add-on, under Cleanup Tools, we have the Remove BBone tool. You just have to have your rig selected, click it, and that will remove all bendy bones from your rig. So if you don't want any bendy bones, that is a quick solution. And if you only want to affect the spine, I'm going to undo, and I'm going to create a text editor here, create a new text, and here I'll paste a little script that I wrote. So if I run this script now, you'll see that it removes the bendy bones from the spine. Here it is again. And this exact script will work for the default human meta rig. If you have something else, you may have to change this rig name or the bone names. And by the way, if you're working with Blender 3, let's name this script. Remove spine bendy bones. So if you're working with Blender 3 or higher, you can go to your meta rig, advanced options, and you can include this script in here. And now if I generate the rig, it will generate the rig and then immediately run this script. So now if I check my deformation bones, you'll see that the bendy bones for the spine are disabled. Okay, moving on, let's talk about a solution where we can keep the bendy bones for the spine, but still get a solid behavior from the pouches. Okay, I'm going to go back to my meta rig, remove this script and generate again. And now I'll have bendy bones again. So one possible solution is to add an additional bone that doesn't have any bendy bones and parent it to the bendy bone. And in this rig, it just so happens that we already have such bones. For example, these pelvis bones. So let's try to attach this pouch to the pelvis bone. I'm going to go to object mode, select the pouch, and it is currently parented to def spine. So let's select def spine, select all vertices and click remove. And then I'm going to search for the pelvis bone, select pelvis L and assign. Okay. Now I'll display the controls. And if I rotate this control, you'll see that this pouch here, which is parented to the bendy bone, still stretches, but this one, which is parented to the normal bone, does not stretch. It is stable. Okay. So if we wanted to fix this pouch as well, we would parent it to the pelvis bone again. Let's do it. First, remove the influence of the spine bone, and then assign all vertices to the pelvis R bone. Okay, no more squashing and stretching for the pouches. Okay, and if you want to do the same for the buttons, you would have to add 3 more bones. That is a little bit of a disadvantage of this solution. You may need to add a lot of additional bones, but that is not such a problem. So for Rigify, I'll add the additional bones to the meta rig, go to the meta rig and go to edit mode, add 1 more bone, and I'm going to press F2 and call it button 1. Position it at the button. And in pose mode, I'm going to give it a rig type, super copy, and I'm going to keep the control option. You'll see why in a second. Edit mode, and let's create 2 more copies for each button. And now I'm going to parent each button bone to the closest spine bone. And generate. And now if we look at the deformation bones, you'll see that I have additional button bones. So now I need to make sure that each button mesh is only assigned to the button bone. So they still have the armature modifier, so I could delete all of these groups for all of the button meshes. And then I can select the rig, then shift select the button, go to weight paint mode and control click on this button bone and go assign automatic from bone. And that will fully assign this mesh to the button bone. And let's do the same for the other buttons. Okay. Now if I move the controls, the buttons will not stretch. There's still a problem with extreme rotations where the buttons will clip into the cloth, and we'll be solving this in a second. But here, because I created controls, I can also manipulate these buttons individually. Anyway, let's move on to the next solution. And the next solution is one where we will actually attach these buttons and pouches to the cloth mesh itself, rather than assigning them to bones. And so first I need to detach these props from the cloth. So to fully detach one of these props, I need to first unparent it, and that will delete the armature modifier. If it's still there, you have to delete it, and then also get rid of the vertex groups. And by the way, again, if you have game rig tools, you can do this quicker. I'll just select all of the props, and then go to Utility Tools, Unbind Mesh. Okay, and just press OK. And that will remove the vertex groups, remove the armature modifier. So these meshes are now independent from the rig. So to attach them or to pin them to a part of the mesh, here's what we can do. For example, for this pouch, actually let's first hide it, and then I'll select the main mesh and go to Edit Mode, and I want to attach it right here. So I need to select 3 vertices, exactly 3. And by the way, they don't have to be adjacent vertices. Just to show you, I'm going to select this vertex, for example, and that will create a little triangle on which our prop will be attached. So let's go to Object Mode, unhide the pouch, and I'll go to Edit Mode and deselect all vertices. Then I'll Shift select the main mesh, go to Edit Mode, and now I still have these vertices selected, so I'll press Ctrl P and choose Make Vertex Parent. Now, if I go to my rig pose mode and move this part of the body, you'll see that the pouch is attached to this part of the mesh. Okay, let's do the same for one of the buttons. Deselect all vertices for the button, then go to the mesh, edit mode, and here I kind of don't have enough vertices, so I'll add some. And select 3 vertices, go to object mode, select the button, shift select the main mesh, edit mode, Control P, make vertex parent. And now this button will be sticking to the mesh. Okay, I'll quickly do the same for the remaining props. And when I'm done, all props will be sticking to the main mesh. And this will probably give you the most stable behavior. The props will be sticking exactly to the mesh. And if you want the props to be assigned to bones, then you can make the bone stick to the mesh, but not directly. Bones cannot be parented to vertices like meshes can, but empties can be parented. So I'm not going to show the whole process, but you can add an empty here. And parent it to 3 vertices. Now the empty will be sticking to this vertex. And now I can add a bone constraint. And you could use child of, but probably copy transforms will give you the most stable behavior. And the target will be the empty. And you'll see that the bone orientation flipped a little bit, and there are other details that we could talk about, but I think I'll make another video about that because this technique is rather advanced. And here's a second practical example. We have this robotic character, and we want to make sure that it moves as a robot. In other words, we don't want it to deform too much. And rigging a robotic character with Rigify is something that people request a lot, so I'll make a separate step-by-step tutorial about that. But here I'll give you the main hints and techniques that you need for something like that. So here I have the MetaRig already set up, and most of the Rigify settings are in their default state. So let's generate the rig, and let's try to parent with automatic weights. And here, if I rotate this hand, you'll see that the upper arm is twisting. And let's see what we can do if we didn't want that. So first, I'm going to shift-click on layer 29 to display the deforming bones. And now let's rotate the hand again. And you'll see that there is this so-called twist bone that is twisting this part of the arm. So this is the first thing that we need to solve. For a robotic character, we don't want any twist bones. So let's go to object mode and go back to our meta rig, pose mode, and select the first bone of the arm. Go to bone tab, Rigify type, and you'll find this limb segment settings. If you set it to 1, then Rigify will not generate any twist bones. And we have to do this for each limb individually. Okay, let's generate again. Because we changed the number of deformation bones, things will be a little bit messed up. So let's go to the mesh and delete all groups and parent with automatic weights again. Now if I try to rotate the hand, it will still be twisting. If I show the deforming bones and rotate again, we see that this bone is not twisting at all. So why is the mesh twisting then? And this has a little bit to do with the weights, but mainly it has to do with bendy bones again. If I switch display to bendy bones, you'll see how the bendy bones are twisting. If I select this deforming bone, go to the bone tab, bendy bones, and set segments to 1, you'll see that it will stop twisting. Okay, now this ball is kind of twisting, but we can easily solve this by tweaking the weights. So just select one vertex and press L to select the remaining connected vertices. And here I want this ball to be deformed by the hand, I guess. So let's set the hand weight to 1 and all other weights to 0. And press copy. Now back to the armature. If I rotate this, you'll see that there is no twisting. Okay, and you may find similar problems in the shoulder area, in the leg and so on, and you can solve them in the exact same way. The last thing that I'm going to show before I wrap things up is that you can remove the bendy bones right from the meta rig. So this bendy bone for the forearm, we kind of tweaked manually, but instead what I can do is go to my meta rig, pose mode, and again select the first bone of the arm, go to the rig type options, and under limb segments there is another setting which says BBone segments, and it is set to 10. If I just set it to 1 and do the same for the other limbs and generate, you'll see that the deforming bones for the arms and legs now do not have any bendy bones. The spine still does, and as I said earlier, Rigify does not give us any rig type options for the spine, but we can remove them manually, or you can use the scripts that I showed earlier. If this video has been useful, please click like and subscribe. If not, let me know in the comments. And by the way, if you join my supporters on Patreon or Gumroad, you'll get access to unreleased videos.